In a small, picturesque town nestled between rolling hills and a shimmering lake, Emily Parker was the envy of many. She had it all: a loving husband, two beautiful children, and a successful career as a financial consultant. To the outside world, Emily's life was perfect. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to show. Emily's financial expertise masked a dark secret. Years of unchecked spending and risky investments had plunged her family into a debt so massive it was insurmountable. Creditors began calling, and the once happy family dynamic turned tense. Her husband, Mark, grew distant, sensing something was wrong but unable to pinpoint it. Emily was trapped, desperate to escape the mounting pressure, but unable to face the consequences. That was when the idea took root. A whispered thought, barely audible at first. What if I disappeared? The thought grew into an obsession. Emily began researching cases of people who had successfully faked their deaths. She devoured every article, video, and true crime podcast she could find, studying patterns and mistakes. She created a meticulous plan, one that would free her from the crushing weight of her past while leaving just enough ambiguity to ensure her family's financial security. Her plan hinged on a staged car accident. Late one night, under the guise of a business trip, Emily drove her SUV to a remote stretch of highway. She had carefully chosen the location, a sharp curve near a cliff overlooking a ravine. She packed the vehicle with items that would leave investigators certain she was the victim. Her purse, wedding ring, and even handwritten letters addressed to her husband and children, apologizing for her decision. As the clock struck midnight, Emily pushed the SUV to the edge of the cliff. With trembling hands, she set the gear to neutral and let gravity do the rest. The car tumbled into the ravine, crashing into jagged rocks below before bursting into flames. Emily stood on the edge, heart pounding, before slipping into the shadows and vanishing. The next morning, the wreckage was discovered by a passing truck driver. Authorities quickly identified the vehicle as Emily's. The scene painted a tragic story. A woman, overwhelmed by personal struggles, had driven off the road in a desperate act of despair. The fire consumed much of the evidence, leaving only fragments of bone and charred personal effects behind. Mark and the children were devastated. News of Emily's death spread quickly, and the community rallied around the grieving family. Candlelight vigils were held, and Emily's story became a cautionary tale about the pressures of modern life. But Emily wasn't watching from afar. She was busy building a new life. Emily had planned her escape meticulously. With cash she'd been secretly hoarding, she traveled across state lines, ditching her car at a bus station and purchasing a one-way ticket to a city where no one would recognize her. She dyed her hair, changed her name to Sarah Collins, and rented a small apartment in a rundown part of town. Sarah's new life was far from glamorous. She took a low-paying job as a waitress, kept her head down, and avoided forming close connections. Every day, she woke up with a gnawing sense of guilt but reminded herself that she had no other choice. This was her freedom. For months, everything went smoothly. Emily, now Sarah, believed she had left her past behind. But then, the cracks began to show. It started with a news report. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, Sarah stumbled upon an article about Mark. It detailed how he was coping with her loss and how he had become a public advocate for mental health awareness. Seeing his face, his grief-stricken eyes, shattered the illusion of her new life. She began to question if she had truly escaped or simply trapped herself in another kind of prison. Then came the mistake. On a lonely evening, she logged into an old social media account, unable to resist the urge to see her children's faces. The brief login sent a notification to a connected email, one that Mark still had access to. It was a tiny breadcrumb, but one that set an unexpected series of events into motion. Mark's curiosity was piqued when he saw the notification. At first, he dismissed it as a technical glitch, but something didn't sit right. He hired a private investigator to look into it. Weeks turned into months, and while the trail was faint, the investigator pieced together enough to locate Sarah Collins in her dingy apartment 2 states away. Mark's arrival was unexpected. One rainy evening, there was a knock at Sarah's door. When she opened it, she froze. There he stood, drenched from the rain, eyes filled with a mix of rage, confusion, and heartbreak. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling. It's you. Sarah tried to deny it, but the truth was written all over her face. She broke down, confessing everything. The debts, the fear, the desperation. Mark listened in stunned silence before walking away, leaving her sobbing on the floor. The fallout was swift. Mark contacted the authorities, and Emily's story became a media sensation. The public, who once mourned her as a tragic figure, now vilified her as a manipulative fraud. She faced charges for faking her death, insurance fraud, and abandoning her family. In court, Emily tearfully explained her actions, pleading for understanding. Her lawyer argued that she was a victim of societal pressures, but the judge showed little leniency. Emily was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with parole possible after 3. Prison was harsh, but it forced Emily to confront her mistakes. She attended therapy, enrolled in financial literacy classes, and began writing letters to her family. Slowly, she rebuilt herself, not as the perfect woman she had pretended to be, but as someone willing to own her flaws. When Emily was released, Mark and the children met her outside the gates. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with tears and tentative embraces. Trust would take time to rebuild, but they were willing to try. Emily's story became a powerful lesson about the dangers of living a double life and the strength it takes to face one's problems head-on. She spent the rest of her life advocating for mental health awareness, sharing her story so that others might avoid the same path.